Well, without further ado, let's talk about key number one. Well, the first key is seeing yourself as you really are. We really need to have a healthy perception of ourselves if we are going to be spiritually healthy people. And that means avoiding an inflated sense of self-importance. I've got a lot of people in my life who keep me humble, and that's always a very healthy thing. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But when I talk about avoiding an inflated sense of self-importance, I'm not just talking about having good self-esteem, because you can have a lousy self-esteem but still have an inflated sense of self-importance. You see what I mean? The more inflated our sense of self-importance, the less room there is for other people and the less room there is for God. Now, with each of these 7 keys, I'm going to ask an incisive and probing question, a reflective question to prod your thinking. So for this first key about seeing yourself as you really are, here's the question I'd like you to think about, and that is, who is your court jester? The fact is we all need one, and I'm not just talking about someone who can make you laugh, but someone who can make you laugh at yourself. In medieval times, in medieval monarchies, the court jester was much more than a mere buffoon. He was the only person in the royal court who had license to mock the king or queen, usually to reveal the folly of his or her majesty's ways. Now, Richard Rohr, the well-known Franciscan priest and author, is very blunt when he describes what a court jester could do. He says that the court jester is the only person who could tell the king that he was full of and do so with impunity. I think I was just censored. Nick, did you censor me? He's shaking his head no. Okay, but I think you all know what Richard Rohr is saying. Now, in our society, not only do we lack court jesters, but we also seem to be encouraged to do the opposite and to kind of toot our own horns. It's especially true in sports. Have you ever noticed that you see an athlete score nowadays, especially in football? You see it a lot in basketball too, but it's followed by all this chest thumping and muscle flexing, and it's all designed to sort of draw attention to yourself, toot your own horn, and inflate that sense of self-importance. And so what I like to tell people is that each of us needs in life is our own court jester. We each need someone who loves us enough and can tell us that we're full of it, to keep us grounded, to overcome any inflated sense of self-importance. This notion of an inflated sense of self-importance is not new. In fact, it is the original sin. The book of Genesis tells the story of the fall of Adam and Eve, and their sin was not simple disobedience, but an inflated sense of self-importance. They ate the fruit because the serpent said that if they did, they would become like God. Now, that's a hard offer to pass up. It's quite affirming and seductive, to have someone come along and tell you that greatness is within your grasp. But Adam and Eve reached for that which belonged only to God, and they ended up alienating themselves from the very God who created them. They responded by hiding from God and by pointing fingers at one another. So what we really need to do is to properly position ourselves in relation to God and others. A GPS, a global positioning system that most of us have in our cars nowadays, well, they give us a sense of our proper location. And in our spiritual lives, what we really need is to position ourselves humbly before God and others. It's no coincidence that when we begin Mass with the penitential act, we acknowledge our own sinfulness and we acknowledge God's great mercy. And we can't really go further in the Mass until we're properly positioned humbly before our God. So, as an Easter people, we strive to achieve this balanced self-perception by humbling ourselves in service to others. During this Easter season, we celebrate the fact that it was Jesus' willingness to humble himself that led to his glorious resurrection. St. Paul reminds us in his letter to the Philippians in chapter 2 that Jesus humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God has highly exalted him. This Easter season, we pray that as an Easter people, we too will learn to humble ourselves, to see ourselves as we really are, and to be exalted along with Christ through the power of his resurrection. Well, having finished key one, I thought it would be good to pause briefly for a little audience participation and to ask that question about who is it that keeps you humble? Who is your court jester? And I'm going to turn it back over to Nick for a few moments, and he's going to invite you to participate in our first poll of the evening. So, Nick, back to you.
Thank you, Joe. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, there is now a small pop-up box open on your screen. The polling question is there. It says, who is your court jester? Please select A if it's your spouse, B if it's a good friend, C if a parent serves the role of court jester for you, D if it's a child or your children, E if it's a sibling, F if it's a coworker that keeps you honest, or finally, please select G if we just haven't given you the right option.
Okay, Nick, thank you very much. We'll come back to Nick in just a few moments when all the precincts have been reported. In the meantime, I just want to remind you that this webinar is being recorded and will be archived on my blog within a week or so of this live event. So if you just enjoyed listening to my voice so much you want to do it again, you'll be able to hear that recording. But more importantly, if there's someone else that you think can benefit from this recording, from this webinar, you can point them to Catechist Journey within about a week's time for that recording. Okay, well, Nick is telling me he's got some results, so let's find out who is keeping us humble. Nick?
All right, thank you, Joe. The number one answer was spouse, coming in with 25% of the responses. Coming in pretty close behind that were good friend and child or children. But we did have at least one answer in every single one of our options, Joe.
Okay, Nick. Who is it for you in your life, Nick? Who keeps you humble?
Absolutely my wife.
Your wife does that. God bless our spouses, right? And we do that for each other. We keep each other grounded. For me, it's also my wife. My kids do a good job of it, too. They really know how to keep me grounded and keep me from taking myself too seriously. Well, thank you, folks, for participating in that poll. And what I would really encourage you to pray for your court jester. Pray for that person in your life that he or she may continue to provide such a wonderful service for you of keeping you humble, because that is what the spiritual life is calling us to be. And I think possibly the greatest example we have is from Mary, our mother, the Blessed Virgin. What a humble example she was, and that all of us can follow as well.